From adorable barnyard kids to majestic mountaineers, goats are some of the most entertaining and charismatic animals on the planet. While I was researching this video, I was surprised to learn that recent estimates put the global goat population at 1 billion individuals. Europe is home to just over 4% of this absolute army of goats, but European farms produce almost 15% of the world's goat milk supply. To be fair to the goats, they're the ones actually producing the milk, but European farmers certainly provide excellent conditions for goat milk production. As with all domesticated animals, intensive farming often unfortunately comes with risks to animal welfare, and as with most milk production, goat kids are typically removed from their mothers so that their mother's milk can be harvested for human consumption. One of the biggest problems with this system is that mother goats, which are called dams, have an active role in the process of weaning. In the wild, goats will encourage their kids to start eating solid foods by physically restricting their kids' access to mother's milk. This helps the kids develop a digestive system that's capable of the complex biological processes required to digest many plants. Intensive production systems often provide their kids with unlimited supplies of milk, removing this incentive to move on to solid foods. Without this encouragement, kids' digestive systems remain underdeveloped when farmers abruptly impose the switch from milk to solid foods. And when kids are unable to access the nutrition in solid foods, weaning often causes stress and lower growth rates, which are bad for both production and welfare. That's why researchers at the University of Reading are trying to develop gradual weaning methods that benefit both farmers and their kids.
The aims of this experiment were firstly to figure out the commercial feasibility of pen-level weaning strategies, and then to figure out the impacts that it was having on kids in terms of their growth, their welfare, and their feed and milk intakes. Before we did this study, I conducted a farmer survey because I found it was really important to understand their views about gradual weaning. And farmers were really concerned about making sure that the strategies could be applied, which sounds really simple, but when a lot of research uses technology that they don't use, it's actually really important. They were also really concerned about this idea of compensatory milk feeding. They found that if we were removing the milk teats for a period of time and then replacing them, the kids might then gorge on milk and feed at a much higher level, which could cause issues including bloat, which is highly dangerous for goat kids, and also scouring. So firstly, before COVID happened, I was able to get on a commercial farm and collect that data on that feasibility to look at whether or not it would work. And we had over 150 kids in that particular study. We found that it wasn't detrimental to the kids in any way. And then we had a study in which I put kids in my parents' barn that they very kindly let me borrow. And I was able to collect much more detailed information on their solid feeding behaviour and also on their milk intakes. The methodology used for the study was all based around how it would be feasible for commercial farms to use. So we had to do pen level strategies because they don't have access to the technology that enables them to monitor individual milk intakes. But we were able to borrow a milk feeder from Volac, who make highly technologically advanced feeders for calves, which we could adapt down and monitor those individual milk intakes, how often they were feeding. And that was really important because it then meant when we employed the gradual weaning strategy, which was to remove the teats for 3.5 hours per day from day 35 to day 45, and then 2 3.5 hour per day periods from day 45 to 56, we could see how that affected the milk feeding behaviour of the kids and whether or not it resulted in higher or lower milk intakes. There was definitely a work-life balance issue here. Boundaries were very blurred. I was, rolling out of bed in the morning and going down to feed goat kids when they first came into the study at midnight and 4 a.m. and training them to use that feeder. It meant I was working around the clock. We had some poorly kids that came out of the study, and actually one of them lived in my house for 2 weeks because he was very unwell, and he now still lives with my parents along with 2 others from the study. So if you can manage to keep straight boundaries, I think it's really important, but it was a super valuable opportunity to collect lots of data.
Holly's gradual weaning approach mimics natural goat weaning behaviour, whilst theoretically reducing overall milk consumption and improving both welfare and production outcomes. It's important to note that the Volac feeder was only used to measure individual kids' milk intakes to check for the compensatory feeding that Holly's survey showed farmers were particularly concerned about. The actual intervention was to simply turn the milk taps off for a few hours a day, something that Holly's commercial trial showed was feasible on large-scale farms. The only question now is, did it work?
The main outcomes were really divided into a few different categories. So we were looking at growth, which on the commercial farm was really mixed results. And we think that that's potentially due to the social dynamics of the kids. They're in really large groups and things like that. But in the more controlled study, where we were able to get much more detailed results, we could see that growth was higher for those gradually weaned kids during the weaning period. And it trended towards being higher, but wasn't quite significant in the post-weaning period. Then we had milk intakes, and the gradually weaned kids consumed less during the gradually weaned period. And then we had solid feed intakes. And during that time where they were consuming less milk, they were consuming more of that concentrate pelleted feed, which is really important for how their rumen develops, because it's got lots of protein and lots of different amino acids and things that are important for that stomach development. And then their behaviour was also improved. We saw less indicators of frustration in the gradually weaned kids once the milk access was removed. Well, the significance is really improved by the fact that we did something that farmers can use, and I think that that's important. We were able to demonstrate that a pen level weaning strategy that could be used on commercial farms does improve the overall welfare of these kids because of those different aspects I described before. And this is really important because economics are problematic for farmers. And we know that milk intakes are a key concern for them because the cost of milk powder is continuously rising and it's really teetering on the edge of becoming economically unviable. And therefore there's quite a lot of motivation to wean them earlier from milk. But we need to ensure that there's a balance between weaning them earlier, but making sure that they are completely psychologically and physiologically prepared for that weaning transition. And therefore finding that taking the milk teats away works to improve their growth rates, as well as those solid feed intakes and potentially behavioural indicators as well, is a really promising finding. The limitations of this study were typical for PhD research, which is really around the logistics of time and finances. We were very lucky to be able to bury that feeder, but they were in my parents' barn and we were quite space limited. And unfortunately, we were only able to source male kids due to logistics around the distance we could collect them from. So ideally, they would have a better balance of male and female kids and have larger sample sizes as well. And it would be ideal if you could also monitor that solid feed intake individually rather than on the pen level, which is what we had to do. So more technology that could be utilised, which is more expensive, but that would really help with those limitations. In terms of further research that should happen as a result of this study, largely, I would say that it's based around that weaning process. We don't know a huge amount about timings, about when's best. We use the industry standard commercial weaning age of 56 days as our end point for complete weaning from milk. But figuring out exactly when to start that gradual weaning process is an area that needs a lot more work. We need to know how long we can take those teats off and how we can find the balance between making sure that we are motivating them to go and eat solid feed without frustrating them and causing detrimental impacts in terms of their growth because they're not getting enough nutrients.
Holly's experiments provide a promising solution to the problems of weaning goat kids on farms with unlimited milk feeding systems. By implementing a simple intervention that mimics natural goat weaning behaviour, farmers can potentially improve both welfare and production. Further research is needed to optimise this protocol, but the intervention that Holly has already used could be implemented on farms tomorrow and would likely contribute to financial savings, improved growth rates and better kid welfare with effectively zero cost to the farmer. Holly is coming to the end of her PhD, but hopefully the next cohort of students can pick up from where she left off and will continue to develop better goat weaning methods so that these charismatic animals get the care and attention that they deserve. Holly's research has been an essential first step, and I'd like to thank her for all of her hard work and for agreeing to make this video with me. If you've enjoyed the video and found it interesting, please consider subscribing or dropping a comment in the comment section below. It really does mean a lot. Thank you for watching.
Oh dear, did you get a bit of a squirt?